Welcome back, friends. Buddy here at House of Props. Today I will be making this Daemon Targaryen helmet from the HBO series House of the Dragon. So let's get started. I start by cutting the center base piece of the helmet from 6mm foam and close the darts by using contact cement. I take the time to make sure my edges align smoothly, that way there will be less cleanup later. If you haven't already done so, now would be a great time to subscribe to this channel and click that notification bell so you can be alerted when new projects are released. The helmet side pieces are also 6mm foam, and their darts are sealed the same way as the centerpiece. These sides can then be attached to the center part of the dome. You will need to stretch the centerpiece as you attach the sides. This stretching will help give the helmet its dome shape. Again, I try to keep my outer edges of the seams as smooth as possible because it will save me a lot of cleanup time later on. Next, I attach this nose guard piece, but I changed the template to save you a step, so these are already combined in the center part of the dome. To extend the helmet's neck, I add these pieces that connect to the side of the nose guard and align with the center seam in the rear. Once they are attached, this cheek part can now be curved to match the curve of the helmet by heating the foam with a heat gun and bending the foam to the correct shape. Just hold it in position for a few seconds to let the foam cool down, and it should maintain the curve that you put into it. Next, I attach this 4mm foam piece to the bottom of the cheek protection piece. Then I use my rotary tool with a sanding drum to bevel the end. The bevels are labeled in the template, which you can find a link for below. I also bevel the inside of the helmet where the cheek protection piece will sit. But before I attach it, I carve the surface of the cheek protector to add some bevel detail to the facing. Then I use a smooth sanding tip on the areas that I just added the detail to make sure that they are as smooth as possible. Now the cheek protector can be mounted to the inside of the helmet, and the process repeated for the piece on the other side. These small curved pieces are attached to the helmet right behind the cheek protectors, but you want to leave about 1/8 of an inch gap between the two. Both the pieces and the helmet have been beveled, that way everything will sit nice and straight. So now you want to take this piece and align the middle of it with the middle of the helmet in the back. There should still be a bit of a gap between this piece and the previous attached pieces. Next, the long neck protector piece is mounted on the inside of the helmet. It's easier to work with this piece if you align the middle of the piece with the center seam and work to the outer edges. Then I use my rotary tool to carve some shallow grooves along the edges of the neck accent pieces. Then smooth out these grooves with the smooth sanding drum. Next, I took this piece cut from 10mm foam and sculpted it in a similar way to what I did to the cheek protectors in order to create the bevel detailing on the face. These pieces will hold the dragon wings, which are cut from 6mm foam and carved with the rotary tool. The two pieces are then glued together with contact cement, but only the 10mm foam is glued to the side of the helmet. They are mounted about where your ears are. Just take care to align them both equal distances from the center, or they may end up a little wonky. Once attached, I heated the back of the wing with a heat gun and curved the wings out ever so slightly. You don't want to curve them too much, or they may start looking like Dumbo. Then I attached these small 6mm foam fin pieces to the bottom of the neck protector. I don't know what purpose these pieces serve, but they are part of the original design, so I'm including them. To start the helmet crest, I glue 4 pieces of 10mm foam together and cut this shape. It will be glued along the center seam about a 1/2 inch from the 6mm foam bottom edge. I used contact cement and made sure to press the edges down firmly in order to get a secure bond between this crest and the helmet, and that way it won't start to peel up later on. Then I sanded the front of the piece in order to form a shape that represents a ridge along a dragon's spine. Next, I glued these small 2mm foam triangles onto these 6mm foam pieces with CA glue. These were then glued with contact cement just behind the carved spine ridge. Then a small 6mm foam piece is glued to connect the two bottom ends. The dragon head was cut from a piece of 10mm foam, and I used my rotary tool to carve the facial details. The head was then aligned with the nose guard and glued in place with contact cement. Then the small 10mm foam wedge is carved and glued onto the rear of the head, but not to the base. We want it to stick up slightly. Then I carve a groove down the middle of these 6mm foam strips, which get attached to the helmet just above the dragon's eye sockets and curve upwards to meet the crest. To create the rivets, I mark out their placement with a ballpoint pen and place a drop of CA glue on the spot. Then I cure the drop of glue instantly with a drop of zip kicker. Next, I use foam clay to add more detailing to the dragon head, across the helmet, and on the wings. The foam clay can be used to give some three-dimensionality to some pieces that are a little flat, like the wings, but by adding the foam clay you can build up areas and make them look a little bit more sculpted and not so flat material. When the foam clay is completely dry, I attach the spikes over the helmet's eye openings. These are 4mm foam and just attach with CA glue. Then the entire helmet is prepped for painting by first heat sealing the foam with a heat gun. Next, any seams or gaps are filled with quick seal. I apply the quick seal with a palette knife to any areas that may need it, dip my finger in water, and smooth the quick seal so there isn't any edges which need sanding later. Once the quick seal has dried, I spray the helmet with Plasti-Dip. I have found that at least 2 even coats is enough to prime most objects, but I have had some instances where 3 coats are needed. Once the Plasti-Dip has dried overnight, I airbrush on a silver acrylic. I use an airbrush so I don't end up with any brush marks. The silver is way too bright, so once it is dry, I thin some black acrylic with water and brush this heavily on the surface. Then I dab the painted areas to remove some of the paint, but not all. This technique will make the helmet look less like silver and more like steel, so just keep applying this technique across the surface of the helmet until you get the texture that you want. I 3D printed some eyes and glued them onto the dragon head and then based them with a bright red acrylic. You can use foam instead of 3D prints if you so desire. Once the red dried, I thinned some alizarin crimson and applied this wash to the eyes to make them more resemble dark rubies. To create the Mohawk crest, I am using a 20-inch black wig I bought for a very cheap price. I begin by flooding the crest channel with hot glue. It's best for this step to use a hot glue gun and not a crafting gun because you need the glue to be really hot. Then I fold the wig along the center part and the hair and press it into the hot glue. Be careful not to burn yourself. Once the hot glue has cooled down to the point where the wig is secure, I cut about 8 inches off the bottom of the wig. Then some of what is cut off is folded in half and hot glued into the very front of the crest. If you have one, a rotary cutter can help to trim up and even out any scraggly hairs. And there you have it, a Daemon Targaryen helmet made completely with nothing but EVA foam and a wig. I hope you enjoyed this build. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Haas of Props for more movie and TV related projects. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at Haas of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.